Welcome to the Operations Science Podcast, where the art and science of operational excellence come to life through captivating stories of triumph, challenge, and transformation from the front lines of industry. Our distinguished guests, from manufacturing pioneers and medical device innovators to aerospace visionaries, diagnostic lab leaders, and major capital project leaders, unveil the hidden patterns and powerful insights that drive exceptional results in the complex world of operations. Join us on this journey of discovery as we explore the brilliant minds behind the systems that make our world work and uncover the leadership secrets that could revolutionize your approach to operations forever. This podcast is brought to you by the Operations Science Institute, the home of the science behind every operation. If you want to be a better operations or project leader, discover the principles of operations science for yourself. For a quick tour, visit the OSI Insider portal. The web address is insider.opscience.org. And be sure to check out the new book, Operations Science Applied, available on Amazon. Here is your host, Ed Pound.
Welcome to the Operations Science Podcast. Our next guest spent 13 years flying UH-60 helicopters in the U.S. military before landing almost by accident in semiconductor manufacturing in North Carolina. Over the years that followed, he built his operations career across some of the most demanding environments in manufacturing. He was the first production manager at Tesla's Gigafactory in Reno and went on to lead operations in heavy metal, aerospace, and industrial services. What makes Fred's story compelling is the honesty he brings to it, including a hard reset after Tesla and a close look at one of the most persistent problems in manufacturing, the end-of-the-month scramble that never seems to stop no matter what you try. Please welcome to the Operations Science Podcast, Fred White. Hey, Fred, how you doing?
Doing well. Hi, Ed. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. So let's jump right in. To start, you spent 13 years flying helicopters in the military, a world built on discipline, precision, and execution under pressure. And then you walked into a semiconductor plant with no manufacturing background. That had to be a challenge. What was the hardest part of that transition?
I think being in the military, your world is built around managing variability and control, defined roles, pre-programmed responses to situations. Going into manufacturing, it was learning to live in controlled chaos. There's variability everywhere and learning to manage that variability as it arises.
Yeah, that's the case. Operations science basically is predicated on the fact that you're going to have variability. What's the most effective way to manage that? So tell me about the Gigafactory. I'm sure a lot of folks would be interested to hear about that. You were the first production manager. What was the environment like when you walked in?
Chaos ramped up to exponential level. I walked into a construction zone, not a manufacturing facility. So right off the bat, you're trying to establish a system in an already chaotic environment.
Was Elon Musk wandering around the floor barking out commands, or how was the management handled?
No, never saw Elon, but JB Strobel visited weekly and would walk and see the progress that we're making, give his inputs.
Yeah, I imagine that was a pretty, actually high pressure situation because there's a lot riding on that. Your assessment was you weren't seasoned enough for what they expected of you at Tesla. How did that come about? How did you realize that? And then what did you do in terms of stepping back and doing a reset?
Really, the system exposed my inexperience. I wasn't trained on how to manage that much variability. And my lack of experience in operations at that point in time, I had 2 years of operations experience under my belt, really came to light. It wasn't for lack of effort. It was not having the understanding of what to do in that environment.
And let's talk a little bit about the specifics of that. Are you talking about, for instance, how to schedule production, or was it dealing with people, or managing equipment installations? Was there anything in particular that was a challenge?
I think it was managing a system that complex right off the get-go, right? As opposed to walking into a seasoned manufacturing facility where systems and controls are already established. You were inventing those and creating those at the same time that you're expected to produce a product and meet delivery schedules.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting for anybody considering going into a new role, because in that environment, I think everybody's on their own. They're counting on people to build systems maybe that they've already built before, and they hadn't done that. And it sounds like that they were building the airplane while they were flying it. Is that a fair assessment?
I think that's pretty spot on. And yes, the building was literally getting built as we were trying to run production.
And at the same time, you're hiring people, bringing on the workforce. You would think in that particular role, as a production manager, you weren't responsible for setting up the hiring process. So, how did that work in terms of bringing people on? Because I'm sure you're doing lots of that as you were trying to build the facility.
Yeah. So a lot of support came out of the main facility in Fremont, California. So there was a lot of travel for that HR team back and forth. Eventually, they put somebody on site to help manage that. But a lot of the processes and procedures of how we were going to do things were being developed as we were driving the ship.
Yeah, that's interesting. That sounds like a chaotic environment. So after Tesla, you went to supervisory work at Eaton. What did you focus on during that reset, maybe that you hadn't focused on before? And I imagine the level of support was a lot stronger, Eaton being, I presume it was an established facility.
Personally, I focus on system fundamentals, understanding constraints, stabilizing flow, reducing variability, building predictable output, and then building credibility through consistency, not being the hero, just showing up every day and doing what's expected, right? And learning along the way.
Actually, those make two pretty good contrasts. What was the sort of the daily management rhythm at Eaton compared to Tesla? I mean, typically do things like you come in, start of the shift, you have a startup meeting. How did that work, or what were the differences and the similarities between the two facilities?
So at Eaton, walked in, there's already a standard flow to the day. You come in, you get ready for your morning stand-up meeting, review your KPIs, update your metrics, and then make decisions based on the schedule and what the deliverables were for that day. Tesla, the Gigafactory, there were no established KPIs. We were trying to figure out what KPIs needed to be in place to manage the system. And so those were being developed as we went.
So that's a really interesting dynamic. I've seen that before where you go into situations, I think the Gigafactory, it's not like nobody's ever built a factory before. And the fact that there weren't well-defined processes to help the people do their jobs, it sounds like a bit of a failing because, for instance, on very large construction projects, you can't coordinate that kind of work without having predefined processes in place, even though there's a tremendous amount of variability. I don't know so much that's on the person who's in the role. That seems to be in terms of the people who are running the operation. It sounded like it was more of a cowboy mentality where we'll just solve problems as they come up, which is not really a great way to work.
But that says it's one of the things that allowed Tesla to accelerate as fast as it did, is that there was a constant drive to move forward and you'd overcome those obstacles as they came up, but you wouldn't always know what that roadmap was going to look like. You knew where you wanted to go and you knew you had to put one foot in front of the other, and eventually you'd get there. But every time you hit a curve in the road, you would firefight and figure it out. And I think that's the key word. There was a lot of firefighting going on.
Right. And you expect a lot of that with a brand new facility, but there are ways to mitigate that with well-defined processes, basically for managing that variability. But very interesting discussion about what you do when you come into a new situation and how that can be structured to either help people succeed or leave them much on their own. But let's change to another topic that you talked about, which is near and dear to my heart, is the end of the month scramble. And you mentioned it being at a heavy metal shop. Was that Eaton or where was that?
Yes, that was Eaton, classified as heavy metal. They created seismic joints for building installations and a lot of data center infrastructure. So cable tray and server racks, stuff like that.
For the audience in describing that end of the month cycle, essentially, and it's very prominent. My experience has been it's very prominent in public companies that have to do financial reporting. And so the end of the month comes and they're trying to make sure they make the numbers for that month. Describe that process and how that worked and what kind of chaos that tends to accelerate.
Yeah, so it's the classic robbing Peter to pay Paul. Revenue targets were driving behavior. So you're looking at your revenue targets as you're coming up at the end of the month, trying to figure out how you're going to balance everything out. And you end up pulling from the next month in order to make your revenue targets for the current month, which means that as you're starting the next month, you're already in the hole. And it's a very self-predicting behavior where the cycle is going to keep repeating itself until behaviors change.
Yeah, it's a tough situation because you can understand from the finance guy's standpoint, we got to make the numbers for this month, but it does also create a lot of variability, as you mentioned at the end of the month. There's this huge rush to get everything out, and then you go to start the next month to make your numbers, and there's nothing in the queue to work on. It's a tough balance between financial requirements and productivity because it tends to work against productivity. Because did you guys work a lot of overtime at the end of the month?
Oh, yeah, of course. It was wide open. At the same time, you're trying to control it.
Did you find anything that was effective with that, or was it just ingrained to the company and it never really went away?
It was really ingrained in the company and never went away. And it won't change until you change the incentives, the capacity, or the leadership mindset.
Yeah, I agree with you. And Eaton's not the only company that does that. That's very common. I worked at Allied Signal many years ago, and it was the same sort of thing. There was always this mad scramble at the end of the month or the end of the year. But yeah, it's a tough cycle to break. You mentioned that when you were there, you organized supervisors around value streams instead of departments. One person responsible for the entire flow from raw materials to finished goods. So where'd you come up with that idea? How did people react to that? Were they doing that before? Was it completely different? Describe that change transformation.
It was different. Obviously, anytime there's change, you have certain people that embrace change. Most people are very change resistant. So you need to prove that it's going to work and make their life better. Some saw it as being given more work for the same pay, but the intention is to break down silos. Instead of having a supervisor in one department managing their silo by breaking down and managing value streams, you get rid of those walls and the barriers, and you can improve flow.
Yeah. So what kind of results did you see from that? Did that translate to the bottom line or service improvements?
Yes, to an extent, but really the biggest issue was there wasn't enough slack in the line. So as the variabilities would pop up, because we mentioned earlier, variabilities are always there. Because there was no slack in the line, a small variability quickly turned into a bigger issue.
That's completely predictable. Operation science will tell you that every time. If you're trying to run at 100% utilization, you might get lucky, but most of the time you just create a lot of chaos. How long did that process take when you walked in and said, hey guys, we're going to switch to value streams instead of the batch and processing approach between different departments? How long did that take when you first introduced the idea until people were comfortable with it?
Probably about 90 to 180 days, about 3 to 6 months before it was fully comfortable and running smoother.
As I mentioned, Operation Science will tell you if you're trying to run at very high utilization, you get longer cycle times. You also get a lot more variability. Was there any recognition of that? Did you have any ability to say, well, wait a minute, guys, maybe we shouldn't schedule at such high levels and we should schedule at lower levels of utilization and we'll get better output? Was there any discussion of that?
No, unfortunately, it's the mindset of doing more with less was very prevalent for cost savings reasons. And I think the mindset was we'll just push everybody harder. And we did work on implementing lean, but you can't 5S your way out of a capacity problem.
That's right. The example I like to give is you can stand on the top of a 5-story building and tell everybody the goal is to get down as quickly as possible. And if people don't understand the basic concept of gravity, some folks might step off the side of the building and they'll win, but they won't like the results. It happens a lot, which actually is why we have the Operation Science Institute to try and get people to understand those things. The other dynamic I see there is when you're a production manager, as you've described, you're right in the middle of all those operations dynamics. And the finance guys really are what they're trying to do is help the company be as profitable as possible. But they have a different model. When they're doing standard cost allocation, they figure that the more units you make, the less unit cost you'll have. But that drives you to high utilization. And so what happens is people who can't explain the operations science of the operations to the finance guys end up using the finance model, which tends to be let's work harder with less. But it's a classic dynamic.
Yeah, swing the hammer harder.
Yeah, exactly. So you've worked in semiconductors, automotive, heavy metals, aerospace, and industrial services. What do you see that's true about operations in all those environments?
Let's see. High utilization increases variability. Variability increases WIP. WIP increases lead time, and lead time reduces predictability.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's operations. That's great. I didn't pay you to say that, but that's a great description of basically how operations science works. It's the same across every environment. But you came to these environments. That's interesting that you developed that intuition because that's accurate intuition. And some people don't develop that intuition, which causes them problems. But you came to manufacturing from military without the manufacturing background. So did you just pick it up through a simulation? Was there training that you went through? How did you come up with your mental models for how operations work?
No specialized training. I like to read. I also had some really great mentors along the way. And I've always embraced continuous improvement mentality and always just looking for better ways to do things. As you're making observations, some of these things just come to the forefront, just kind of slap you in the face. It's just the truth.
Yeah, right. Working it harder and faster doesn't always get you what you want. Indeed. If you were advising someone who was coming into their first operations role today, the one you had early on, what would you tell them that you wish someone had told you?
Learn the fundamentals before you try to fix everything. Understand the system before you start making judgments. Build relationships early. Don't confuse urgency with importance. And don't chase titles, chase competence.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great advice to give anybody. One topic that we got to talk about, which is the latest and greatest, is artificial intelligence. Did you have any experience with that in your roles or any of your recent roles? What are you seeing in terms of development of those applications in the world you work in?
So I haven't seen it too much in the production world. The most I've seen it is higher level managers are using AI to write their emails for them. And it's very clear when they come through, that person didn't put any time or thought into what they actually wrote. But I haven't seen it on the production line yet. But I think that the applications, especially reducing inefficiencies, optimizing production, optimizing flow, the potential is there.
Oh, definitely. One thing in talking with other people on the podcast that I think there's an immediate application for is documentation. Somebody needs a standard procedure, get old Joe who's been here for 20 years and just get him to talk about what he does. And then AI is very good about taking that and converting that into an output, a document, which if you had to do it by yourself would take days. That's definitely an application for it. Back to continuous improvement. When you're managing these efforts and you have an idea, did you guys run, for instance, Kaizen projects or Tiger teams or whatever the term may be to focus on specific improvement projects? How did that work?
Yeah, I've seen it a couple different ways. Every organization, every manufacturing organization I was in, we ran Kaizen events. One organization, Chromalloy, that I adopted the process and took it with me is they would do these swarm teams where they would take some continuous improvement experts from around the company, send them to a site. That team there would define some of their 3 or 4 top problems. And then those experts working with the team would focus on those improvements and running Kaizen events to find resolution. And then the local team would implement it. We do the follow up 90 days, 180 days that did it stick. Very effective. So the more an organization embraces continuous improvement, the more agile I found them to be.
Yeah. So when you're approving those projects, and I'm sure it's different in different companies, but was there an issue with getting approval for a project? Did you have to provide a cost justification and go to the VP of manufacturing, for instance? Or was it just left up to the group in terms of what they wanted to work on?
It was left up to the group. So typically you'd put together a business case saying, this is what I want to work on. This is why I want to work on it. This is what I think we can do. This is what the outcome should be. And you compile a list of different projects and you pick the 3 or 4 that the team feels would be the needle movers, where you're going to get the biggest bang for the buck, and you'd go after them.
In your experience, I'm sure you went through a lot of those projects. What would you say was the success rate in terms of the project? And basically, I'm collecting data here because I don't see a whole lot of data on that except very general. But what would you say in terms of the success rate of those the swarm teams or the Kaizen projects were in terms of achieving all of the benefits that were promised?
Probably closer to 40%. And the biggest piece, and the thing that makes these work is accountability. If there's no accountability, if no one's keeping you honest, as far as, did you slide back into old bad habits? Did you stick with what we said we're going to do? Or did you become so overwhelmed that you just moved on to the next shiny thing? If there's no accountability, the success rate is incredibly low.
Yeah, yeah, that's a fact. Yeah, we just see that all the time. The other thing we see is conflicts between projects. Did you find that there were projects, not at one particular place, but anywhere across your experience, where you work a project and then somebody comes along 6 months later and works another project, and that works against the things you've established in some of the earlier projects?
Yeah, no, I don't think I really realized it in the moment, but looking back on the projects and how they intertwine, there's definitely some silo mentality, just looking at the one issue and not the total picture.
Because one of the things we're really big on with Operation Science is just have you could call it a digital twin, you could call it a working model, whatever, of your entire production process, and then use that to determine where the points of leverage are. Did anything like that exist when you were working with those projects?
Yes and no, maybe not to the full scale, but in limited capacity, yes.
Right. I mean, generally you start with a value stream map, right? And that kind of is intended to give you some sort of an understanding of the process. But if you're just focused in one area, then it's local optimization, which tends to happen a lot.
Yeah, I don't think I ever saw an organization that had a full value stream map of their entire process.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's pretty common. And it is unrealistic to expect that you'll have a model that your entire factory. I mean, if you do that with discrete event simulation, boy, that can take forever. And it's a hunt and peck thing. It doesn't really a lot of times tell you what to optimize. But certainly you can set that up. My experience has been you can set that up across a large swath of the organization. And the idea is to optimize general policies, as you mentioned, how much work in process you have, what utilization levels you're going to work to. And if you set those policies, you end up with a much bigger improvement if people stick to it. As you point out, you need accountability than when people just come in and they're looking at projects piecemeal. Let's switch topics a little bit and talk about Fred White, the man. Where did you grow up and what was your childhood like?
Gosh, I grew up between a little town outside of Los Angeles called Palmdale in Germany. My father was retired military and decided to retire in Germany, living between my father and my mother's house. So graduated in California, but really enjoyed growing up in Europe and in Germany.
Well, that's interesting. So, how did you split your time? Was like 6 months one, 6 months the other, or summers in Germany? How did that work?
A little of that, I lived in Germany for about 4 years straight at one point. So I came back for high school.
Excellent. Oh, gosh, particularly at that age. I mean, that's just such a great experience for a child to be exposed to different cultures in different parts of the world. So, when you came back after 4 years and living in Germany, what was it like relating to your peers? Did they see you as a cool kid who lived in Germany?
No, that's what I thought. But I came back to the States. I missed out on the time when people start forming cliques and little groups. I had a really strange fashion sense. I didn't understand any of the modern lingo, and I had a really thick German accent. So first couple years was like being a foreign exchange student in my own country.
Wow, that's fascinating. You've lost that accent, I can tell you that.
I have.
But the other thing is, it seems like that would really provide you a lot of flexibility and resilience getting through that you would carry on later in life. Were there any lessons that you took from that helped you in your future endeavors?
I think just figuring out who my authentic self is and just being comfortable being me.
Who were your early influencers? You mentioned having mentors. Who were some of your early influencers? And what was the good advice they gave you?
So I had some NCOs and officers in my early military career that were very influential to me. One of them, go off on a little tangent here. So September 5th, 2003, I was in an IED blast in Baghdad and I had some significant injuries coming out of that. Wanted to transition to the officer side of the military and submitted a green to gold packet So in order to do that, you had to be accepted to a university and then accepted by cadet command. I was accepted to the university, but cadet command said I wasn't wasn't fit to be in the military anymore. So they denied my application.
Wait a minute. What was their reasoning for that? Because your injuries?
Yeah, I lost some fingers. And one of the military medical regulations says that if you're missing the first two sections of two fingers on the same hand, you're disqualified from military service. Where my amputation was just above the knuckle. So I made the argument that it wasn't the complete first two portions. So I was able to stay in. But then I was talking to one of my NCOs and asked me what I really wanted to do. And I wanted to be a pilot. And he suggested going the warrant officer route. And I'm thinking about it and putting together a packet in the military. It's an event. There's a lot of work that goes into preparing a packet. And I just went through it with Cadet Command, and I really didn't want to be disappointed again. And he looked at me and he told me, what's the worst that can happen, right? You get told no? Okay. You're no worse off than you were when you started. So why not try? So that was a really pivotal moment for me and influenced a lot of my behavior going forward, being a risk taker, not being risk averse, and then comparing the outcome. What was the risk of the outcome? And if you're not going to lose too much as a worst case scenario, why not try?
Particularly if it's something you want.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Wow, that's great advice. Absolutely. All right, last question. So what do you do outside of work to unwind? You got hobbies or sports or anything like that?
Yeah, mainly I hang out with people that have absolutely nothing to do with manufacturing or operations.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my family, my wife and I have 4 children. 3 are off exploring the world. My youngest is at home still. She's an avid dancer, so that consumes a lot of time. So supporting my kids in their endeavors. I enjoy golfing, getting out there when I can, and reading. I always have a good book.
What's your latest good book? What would you recommend?
Right now, I'm reading The Secret of Secrets by Dan Brown. So pretty good.
All right. Excellent. Well, listen, what a wonderful story. Great experience. It sounds like you've really done a good job of overcoming obstacles. And thanks also for your service. That sounds like some traumatic experiences to go through. Glad you came out on the other side. We really appreciate you being on the podcast. And hey, I play golf too. Not well, but get out to Reno, we'll have to go out and hit them around.
Absolutely. Sounds good. Thanks so much for having me, Ed.
Yes, sir. Thanks for being on the podcast, Fred.
All right. Take care.
The Operation Science podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. Join the Operation Science Institute at opscience.org. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and see you on the next episode. The views expressed by our guests are their own and do not represent their company's views unless specifically stated as such.